Hello and welcome to the Gothic Unicorn. We're back in the doll's house today and Grandmama's witchy workroom has been furnished. However, with the exception of the fortune telling table that I dressed in a previous video, everywhere's looking rather empty and boring. So my mind has turned to suitably witchy accessories, and that's what we're doing today. I'd like to begin with a little preemptive apology. If my voice is a bit croaky this week, I am very sorry, but hay fever season has hit me quite hard and it's coming and going quite a bit. Now, I have made a list of the things that I might like to include in this room. This is always a very good thing to do with a project, to sort of brainstorm things that you might want to include, as well as the things that you definitely know you want to include. There's actually a fair few things that aren't on this list because they're things that I've already made and have videos for. But I have decided to try and focus my mind because I've got a lot of scope for accessories in this room. So there's my list. Let's get started. One of my favourite ways of filling in gaps is with paper products. Now by that I am referring to things like newspapers, piles of papers, be they letters, bills, whatever, envelopes, even scrolls, if that is the sort of aesthetic for your miniature scene. And for all of those, I start with just this. This is just paper that I've pulled out of my printer. You know, it's bog standard, quite cheap copier paper, but it's brilliant. Now, obviously, it's really, really white, which if you're looking for an older look, isn't going to cut it. Now, you can, of course, use coffee or tea to age your paper. But seeing as I spent so many years in between my miniature collecting period and my miniature making period as a paper crafter, I happen to have inks and things that I can use. So my favourite for creating old paper is actually this ink, which is called Antique Linen. Now they do one in the same range, which is called Old Paper, but I prefer this one. And also I have this one in a pad, and I don't have old paper in a pad for some reason. Now in addition to that, I like to use darker colours to give you that aging that you'll get on the edge of paper when it's been sitting around for a long, long time. And I've got, that's going to annoy me, these markers that are the same ink as is in the pad. Different colours but the same ink. They don't do these anymore, which is a shame because they're really, really handy for small work. And I've got here 4 different brown shades so that I can add extra aging to the edges of my papers. And if anybody's interested in the colours, they are tea dye, vintage photo, ground espresso and gathered twigs. I just pulled out 4 nice browns of different shades as I went along, just to sort of show you what I like to use. Now, the other thing you can do is you can print stuff off. If you've got a printer at home, free printables are a great way to get little bits and pieces for your doll's house. You can get things to make up little boxes, food packaging, that sort of thing. But of course, this is a great way of getting newspapers. Now, this is a sheet that I printed for a project that was done in approximately 1/16 scale last year. It wasn't a very exact project, so these aren't very exact. But because I've got them printed, I will probably use a few just to tuck in here and there. Now these are actually the New York Times. One is from Man Walking on the Moon. The other one, I'm not sure what it is without getting a bit closer, and I'm not going to do that at the moment. But when they're folded up, if you fold them, you can actually just use the same ones and you can make it look like you've got a big pile of newspapers, which is great because you can stick that in a corner or tuck it under something. Great. So I'll probably be using those. But actually, I've got a sheet which is already partly cut down from what I actually used. I had big ideas and didn't need anywhere near as many newspapers as I thought I would. But there's something else that I can use. You can also use, similarly, you can get printouts for bills and letters and things like that. You can make your own in Photoshop, if you're skilled in Photoshop, which I am not. But, you know, free printables are a great way. And again, you can colour this with your inks. Just check the ink on a spare bit of printing before you commit to the bit that you really want, just to make sure that it's not going to smudge. And yeah, you can get some great paper products this way. To make the scrolls, I have cut a couple of strips off my copier paper. Now I've done them at 3/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch because I use my paper trimmer and those are easily marked up on it. So it's really, really easy to get that width. You can do any width you like, you know, you can measure it to whatever you want if you want it to fit in a particular gap. But then all I do is I take a piece off one of the strips and I take a toothpick and I wrap the paper around the toothpick. Now I'm rolling this one all the way up, and all I'm going to do is get a little bit of glue on another toothpick, stick it on the end of there, and then stick it, and then that will come off and can dry. And that is how I make my scrolls, and you can make them any thickness you like. Now this one, which I've done, which is the thicker one, I haven't rolled up quite as neatly, and as you can see I've got a bit of a overhang at the one end. Now what you can do then, and of course this wasn't in the right place, I've got a very fine pen, and all I do then is I just put some little lines so that it looks like there might be something on there. Now you can write on the top of there and leave that sticking out, which I may do on some of the others, but that just gives you your sort of general scrolls. Now to do the aging, you can age it before you roll it. What I like to do is just get the brush end of this particular pen and just sort of run it along the edges once it's done. These are not going to be particularly visible pieces, so I'm not overly fussed about getting an absolutely perfect finish to them. If it was going to be a piece that was front and central in a scene, I'd be a bit more concerned about it. Now the last thing that I do with my scrolls is I get some embroidery thread. Now this is just some that I've got sitting around, and I'm going to cut a piece. This is a lot more than I actually need, but it makes it easier. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of glue onto the scroll, and then I'm going to wrap the thread all the way around, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little simple knot. Now to do this, I'm not going to lie, it is a bit fiddly, but if you use a toothpick or something like that, you can prise it all through. Now I've used the thread with, I think there's 4 strands to that embroidery thread there. It just gives it a nice thick finish. You can do it with just one, and then all I do is I just trim it off, and then I've got a scroll ready to go on a shelf. Use any colour you want, that just happened to be some I got about. So that is your basic scroll. Now I've just made this one to show you how you can make one with a bit more detail. This one's probably going to go on the work table, so it's a little bit more visible. And what I've done is I have written with my fine pen along one edge of the piece of paper before I rolled it up. I also actually discoloured the edge of this one before I rolled it. And what I've done is I've just rolled it up onto the writing just about. And I'll take that out, and as you can see I've got a nice little scroll there. Now if you can hear some strange noises in the background, I don't know if you will, it's actually the house sparrows that are nesting above my bathroom window on the feeder of my craft room window, and they have been coming and going all the time that I've been filming, and I don't know if anything will be picked up, but yeah, they've been quite entertaining. I decided to show you a quick way that you can use like these printed newspapers that aren't really necessarily to scale, but that will work. So I have cut 4 of them out, and I've given them the outsides, at any rate, the printed side, some of my ink treatment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold them approximately along the fold lines. I'm not overly bothered about them looking perfect because they're probably going to be just sticking out from underneath something. And I've just done 4 because I don't have any need for a big pile of newspapers, which you might have, say, in an attic space or even a shed. But in this room, I just want maybe a little bit of something to slip in somewhere underneath something else. And all I'm doing is I'm using a little bit of my glue and I'm just sticking them together. So I've got one double-sided printed sheet. As you can see, I've screwed up a little bit there, but it doesn't matter. I am not in the least bit bothered. And I'm just going to finish these off. Like so. Let's do this last one. The bit of glue I've got out is setting a bit. And then you've got your basic newspapers. Now, at this point, you can see I've got white bits around the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my brush markers and I'm just going to run it along all 4 edges of the papers, making sure to cover up any bits that are incredibly white. I'm going to get a good dose on that fold, and I'm going to repeat that for all 4 of them. Now that I've edged them all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold them, but I'm going to fold them quite roughly because I don't want them to be like neatly stacked or anything like that. So what I think I'm going to do is I folded that one over a bit and I'm going to stick a little bit of glue just on there, just to keep it in place. And I think that's going to be my top piece. Now, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to have one on the bottom that's going to be pretty much flat, And then I'm going to just make a little bit of a pile. Now what I have realised I haven't done, and I left my pen here on purpose to do it, is I just need to put a bit of aging on this fold, because that is what happens with papers. And I have just cobbled that up, but we will fix this. And then get another one. And I'll fold this one a bit neater. And I'll just run that along there like that. And that's what I wanted to do in the first place. And again, stick a bit of glue on the inside, stick a bit of glue on one of the outsides, and stick the paper over the others. So what you can see I've got there is I've got 3 papers that are stacked up that I can put underneath something else. Now it doesn't need to be anything important. It could be that I just put a little, let's see what I've got, a little lid here. I could put something like that, obviously that's not quite to scale, on top of that, and it'd just be peeking out. It just adds another dimension to your miniatures. Obviously you can make a much bigger pile if you want to stick them in an appropriate spot. I did in a shed project, I did quite a pile of papers, but yeah, I quite like that. And then I'll put that to one side and decide where it's going to go when I dress the room. Now I'm just going to show you quite quickly how I made a fake stack of envelopes and then a separate fake envelope with a little bit of a letter sticking out of it. And I again started with a 1/2 inch width strip of copier paper. Nothing more complicated than that. Now to make the stack of envelopes, I've done some accordion folding. And what you basically do is you fold as much as you want, and you glue every other piece, so that in this case I'd glue in that one and in that one, but I'd leave that one unglued. And then when you've got a stack that's all going to be sort of loose at one side and joined up at the other, you can add a bit of aging to your edges, and then all you need to do is tie it again with a little bit of embroidery thread. Now on the top one I put a little fake address, just some little lines and a fake stamp mark. Now this one, the little envelope on its own, was done with another piece of this just folded over like so, glued down either sides, and then a little tiny piece that I cut off from one of my strips stuck in the top. It's not complicated, but it's just going to be something to shove in between things, and I think it'll look quite effective. After I had been making the little pile of envelopes and the individual envelope, I got to thinking that a letter rack could be a nice little accessory to have, and it would sit quite nicely on my mantelpiece. So that's what I've made. I've made a little copper letter rack. Now, this is actually the most simple, straightforward of pieces. I used a strip like this of 160 GSM cardstock. That's the stuff that I would normally put through my printer. And I made 2 U shapes that I glued together. So I've made them each with a different sized piece, as a letter rack quite possibly could be. And then I made a 3rd U, which I fitted and glued all around the outside. So each of these pieces is actually 2 thicknesses of the cardstock. I then stuck a little piece of wire that was hanging around my desk from a previous project onto the front as decoration and painted it first with black and then with metallic copper. And all I've done is I've made a few more little envelopes just by folding over pieces of copier paper that will sit in there, so they'll look like a bit more modern letters than the stuff that I've previously been making. But that's just another little piece that you know, can fit nicely into a little scene. Now, I recently ordered some clothes online, and they came in this really nice paper bag packaging, and there was a big sticker on there that I've removed that said to reuse it, recycle it. And so I am going to reuse it. I'm going to reuse it for something for my doll's house. Now, the paper from this packaging is actually fairly sturdy. I think that if I was to double it up, I could make an actual box from it quite easily. As you can see, I've folded this piece, and it actually keeps the fold quite well. It's quite strong. But I want to make what looks like a parcel wrapped in brown paper. So I need something to wrap, and what I've done is I've took a piece of food packaging and I've just made a tube, a rectangular tube. I literally just scored it, folded it and glued it together, and that will do nicely to make me a little bit of a parcel, because you're not going to see that it's not a solid lump. Or you could make a solid lump if you've got some wood or something like that. You can wrap that up quite easily, but this is just the cheats method. Now I've got a piece of the packaging paper which is big enough, and what I've done is I've marked out on here where that's going to go, and some overhang and that sort of thing. And I'm going to start off trimming out these 4 rectangles on the corners, and then I'm going to glue that onto there. Now I begin by folding up the ends. What I've done is I made a little tab here. As you can see, when I drew this out, I drew extra so that I'd got a tab to fold round. And what I do is I fold it over, I fold the bit down at the top and glue all those top pieces in place first, and then I glue those little tabs, and that just makes for a nice neat end, and you can't tell that there's nothing the other side of it. Nothing more complicated than that. Once the ends are secured, it is quite straightforward in that you will wrap the 2 pieces over. So all I do is I get a little bit of glue along the side, just pinch it into place, and then a little bit more glue onto the paper. Fold it down and just hold it until it takes, and then repeat on the other side. You do not need much glue. Well, I don't need much of this glue, and the less glue you use, the less likely you are to end up with bubbling. And so see, there I have a very simple paper wrapped parcel. To finish the parcel, you could use embroidery thread to wrap around it so that it looks like it's tied up with string. But I'm going to use some tape. Now this is a piece of Scotch tape that I grew up calling magic tape, and I'm going to use my knife and a rule. I'll just remove that end bit because the tape cutter cuts a lovely serration, and I can cut a couple of pieces of tape. If you want longer pieces, you can cut it the other way, and I can go and I can put a little piece of tape on the end, as you might do on a real parcel. Or I can cover up the line where it meets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and finish off where I want to put the tape. To finish this off, I've added a couple of labels to look like an address label and a postage label. Now these are just literally some pieces of copier paper with some lines drawn on them to make it look like there's something there, and then just glued into place. You know, it makes a reasonable parcel. You could make proper printed labels if you desire, but I just can't be bothered at the moment, and this will do because these are not going to be in the forefront of my scenes, they're going to be in the background. Now I've also made another box, a slightly different shape, but using the same tubular box technique. And this one I've just marked up as being empty bottles. That can be shoved underneath a piece of furniture maybe, so it just looks like somebody's reused something. Now I did try and make a paper bag out of the packaging material, and I'm quite happy with it. It's a reasonable size. I haven't done a proper folded bottom. I'm sure that I know that there are better tutorials on the internet than that, and I'm not trying to do a tutorial, but I just wanted to show you that you could make a paper bag and have something spilling out of it, and again tuck it away into a corner of your scene, and all that is from recycled packaging material. And here we have my paper goods made out of scraps of paper. Now I hope you've enjoyed this video and that it has given you some ideas for little bits and pieces that you can make to tuck into those empty spaces in your miniature scene. Although these are intended for my witch's workroom, most of them, except maybe the scrolls, can fit into almost any scene, you know, parcels, papers, even little piles of envelopes. If you have enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe, and until next time, bye.